All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and folks can continue joining us as I do the introduction. We have an hour goes by very fast, and so we want to make sure that our guest speaker today gets all of the time to present her information. So again, welcome, good afternoon. My name is Andres. I am the Workforce Program Manager at CCALAC. Today's crew session 3 is going to be around retention strategies. So just a little bit of the agenda. Cheryl Peterson-Pine is here to do today's presentation. We will do a short breakout reflection after the presentation's over, a little bit of report back, the weekly poll, and then we're going to be closing out with some final announcements here. Just a quick reminder, some group agreements, 3 then me. After you speak, wait until at least 3 other people have spoken before you speak again. Try to stay muted unless you're speaking, so that way we can all share, and also we'll be able to hear when folks are speaking up. Feel free to also use the chat feature to ask any questions, or to post your or to make any comments along the way of the presentation. Just remember, one speaker at a time. Try to be as present as possible, devices down. I know most of you are, this is lunch hour for most folks. So I know sometimes videos are not available, but try to have them on when requested, especially in the breakouts, as it makes it more interactive for everyone. And use the raise hand function when available. So without any further interruptions, I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl Peterson-Pine, who's going to be doing our presentation today. So welcome, Cheryl, and thank you again for supporting Crew 3.0 this year. I'm going to stop share so you can share your screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so my slide probably looks pretty similar to the one you just had up, so I'll go my introduction. Hi, everyone. Let's see. Sorry, it's not. There we go. So, thank you for having me, Andres. It's this is now my 3rd time that I've presented as part of this, because I think it's very important, these topics. So, I am a CFO. I've worked for a decade as a CFO in health centers. So it seems a little odd. People ask me, why do you talk about these things? And so I wanted to share with you where I'm coming from. And I believe that how we interact with our employees every day impacts how they go home to partner and parent. It's really that simple. And I believe that we have an opportunity to engage our teams across our organizations when they understand the importance of their role in the big picture. I think that is a key to retention, because they understand the purpose of their work. And I also believe that when our team members feel more connected to the organization, their work, and each other, the impact of their work is really limitless. So, and I also believe that this starts with each of us. I'll be discussing retention strategies today. And in preparing for today, I was reflecting on CREW, the acronym, right? Retention, engagement, and wellness. And I want to share that retention does not exist separate from those things. How we engage our workforce, connect and communicate with them, provide a sense of belonging and a place where they feel seen and where their wellness is a priority, and it directly impacts retention. In my last organization, we provided 291 team members in our lowest paid grades, which was almost half of our staff, 21 to 25% pay increases, bringing our minimum wage to $22. And I was told recently, or I had been told, that they were all leaving and turnover was so high because we didn't pay enough. Analysis showed that this increase did not move the needle on turnover by more than 1%. So it's not all about money. I've also seen examples of teams within an organization that have very little voluntary turnover over a several-year period. Teams engaged, they have development or a learning plan, very connected to each other and their leader, and felt valued and felt informed of what was going on in the organization. And within 6 months of a leadership change, 1/3 of the team left and half left at the year point. They felt disconnected, uninformed, and underappreciated. So all of these things really drive retention, and it doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can start one lone initiative and hope it works, but it's really many things layered together that becomes part of the organizational culture, or at the local level, the team culture. I'm going to briefly discuss communication because in my experience and based on the research, it is the single most important initiative, but I promised Andres it would be very brief on that part. And then we can talk about how it changes how your workforce connects to your organization, the mission, and each other. And it's often overlooked and assumed that it's covered. My hope is that each of you will take something away from this session that you can put to use in short order. And I hope that we all get something out of this today. But before I move on to the rest of the presentation, I thought I would share with you a great contest that Bay Area Community Health, where I most recently worked, did in the summer of 2022. So it was my contest, the CFO, which is not common. But every time we had a win, I would come out of my office, literally, this is really what I would do. I would come out of my office singing and maybe dancing, "This Is How We Do It" by Montel Jordan. So, and for those old enough, 1995, it became a thing everywhere in the organization. Yes, this is how we do it. So I suggested a contest where teams of any grouping, location, friends, service, we didn't define how they grouped themselves, could participate. And at the very least, they had to rewrite the lyrics. We never thought we would get the finished product I'm going to show you. Who knew the team at our Liberty location had a singer and a rapper, dancers, not to mention someone who could produce the final video with edits. They put the original lyrics on a Google Doc, and everyone, I repeat, everyone, they insisted on everyone at that location participated in rewriting all of the lyrics to fully incorporate clinical services and functions. And they came in early to make sure that they could film it. We required none of this. They took the initiative for a relatively small prize. And I thought this was a great way to start this session because it truly illustrates how teams can be very invested and feel part of a team. Let me stop sharing here and share again. Here we go. You see a video on the screen now? I hope, yes?
Yes, you can see
Okay,
that.
great.
This is how we do it. This is how we do it. This is how we book it. As good to be inside. Don't feel alright. You think that you feel on time. So reach for your ID and give it up. Got to stop saying you're in love. So the phone's while you're waiting. Emmy's in the back saying, glad that you made it. You feel good, don't feel good tonight. Sometimes I take my meds, sometimes at night. All the medicine to the pharmacy and live out. You gotta get your lights on before the follow-up is made. So when you hear and talk to, oh, your people's up. Now let me hear the patient say, patients feeling love and it's all because this is how we do it. We'll do our best anywhere from my choice. This is how we do it. To all the patients, get your favor. This is how we do it. Fresh free in the cycle, that's your best. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. All hands are in the air. And them from here to there. If you're gonna OGP, you will try to see a player. See, my back's been good to me. Ever since I was with Dr. G. But now I got a quick C. The painful to my knees. No 100 pills, y'all. If you were from where I'm from, then you would know. Yo, I gotta get a pep check and transmission. You can always come for more. Whatever it is, go away. Order your glasses or your prescriptions up and let me get the patient say, it's feeling love, it's all because this is how we do it. Liberty does it like nobody does. This is how we do it. We'll do our part, sign you up from my chart. This is how we do it. Appointments made to you in 10 days. This is how we do it. They just feel in love, it's all because that's how we do it. Liberty does like nobody does. That's how we do it. It's all my homies. That's how we do it. Now, just bring it back to you.
Check it out. Once upon a time, there was a John Doe. Man, he needs some money, but income was low. Everything they said, I understood. Member services got you covered. Now you're good. Block has its BH council is a game. Have to come monthly. That's what Obama said. Mental health is gonna get back on track. Sadness, anxiety, gonna get smashed.
It's feeling love, it's all because this is how we do it. Liberty does it like nobody does. This is how we do it. We're two apart, turning up from my chart. This is how we do it. Appointments made to you in 10 days. This is how we do it. Patients feeling love, it's all because this is how we do it. Liberty does like nobody does. This is how we do it.
Right. All right, so now let me go back to my slides here. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's just a nice way to start our conversation today. So this is from new research published from the Harvard Business Review in spring of 2021, and it relates to our discussion today. That over 14,000 people were included in the study, and the discovery was that only 15% were working at optimal performance. And 16% indicated they were using less than 50% of their full potential. So this list is what those polled said supported them in working at optimal performance, and they're all tied to drivers of a positive employee experience. And there's science behind the fact that if people are not actually feeling, or if they're feeling underutilized, they will go to look for somewhere where they are more utilized. So, and the thing that's very telling about this, that the first was trust, and this is related to how we connect with our employees. Gallup's new data is that 21% of people trust their organizational leadership. And when I spoke at a conference in Seattle earlier this year, I polled the attendees for my session, and about half said yes, which means that about the other half were either not at all, or a lot of the time they did not trust the leadership of their organization. And experts explain that the leadership is really tied to authenticity, or the trust is tied to authenticity, logic, and empathy. So they experience the real you, they know that you can do it, and your reasoning and judgment are sound, and they believe you care about them and their success. That empathy piece is very, very important. And so it's no surprise that when we're looking at a list like this, we see things that are impacted by communication, and such as clear expectations, clear understanding of why the rules are in place, safety to ask questions. There's a few times today where I'm going to talk about psychological safety within an organization. If people do not feel that they can speak up about what's either bothering them or suggestions they have, retention really is impacted. It impacts the employee experience. It impacts how our employees interact with each other. And all of that can have a negative effect on the organization. The leadership emotional intelligence, again, that goes to empathy that I was discussing earlier with trust. And people want to understand the purpose and meaning of their work. I am a CFO, I have a finance team, and organizations that have departments like that that are so far removed from direct contact with the mission need to have special attention paid to how those employees are going to be able to feel part of the big picture. So this, I'm going to talk a little bit about communication, and it's actually from one of my, let's see if we can get it, one of my favorite books on that covers retention. It's called The Employee Experience: How to Attract Talent, Retain Top Performers, and Drive Results. And at the very beginning of the book, and just full disclosure, I mentioned books a few times in this session. I read a lot, about 100 books a year, and about half of them are on all these topics that I'm going to address today. So, and I'm asked constantly, what is the secret? What's the one thing that we can do right now to improve either the employee experience or create a resilient organization or manage change, whatever the issue is? And each time I will say it's communication. We'll talk, I will not talk as much about this as I normally would, but it should never be overlooked as a strategy to create a stronger organization. And Adam Grant, who's a professor at Wharton, says, Wharton Business School says, repeat after me, good communication requires repetition. The data is that leaders are 9 times more likely to be criticized for under communicating than over communicating. And those who say too little can come across as unclear and uncaring. By the time that we are tiring of what we have to say, it's when, especially in large organizations, where the message is really getting through. The researchers of the book, the authors of the book that I was just showed you, Malett and Ride, provide an illustration of a broadcast, and the leaders sending messages and the employees are the radio receivers. The problem is the farther the employee is from the original message, there can be disruption and noise, and especially if there are supervisors or managers in the way of that message. And furthermore, if the actions are not following what the communication says, then there is no trust being created from what the messages are. At Bach, where I was, Bay Area Community Health, our COO and our CSD alternated on an email blast that went out every other Friday, I think it was. And yes, there's always employees that aren't going to read it. And we would have employees that say, oh, nobody ever told me about that. And we would see that, because you can check these things in emails, that they didn't actually open it. But what actually was best about this is that certain managers and leads would use the blast in their Monday morning huddle. So to make sure that everybody knew the things that were going on. Employees really want to know. It keeps them from worrying. It makes them feel more confident in their role. And it makes them feel part of what's going on, and that you think that they are important in understanding what's happening at the organization. When we're intentional with our communication, especially during the work from home environment, there isn't the opportunity for water cooler or hallway conversations, and we need to make time and create venues to stay connected. Yeah.
Cheryl, there's a comment in the chat asking if you could post the name of the book that you mentioned.
Absolutely. I can't do it while I'm talking, but if I send it to you, Andres, can you share it?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. And thank you for it really is a fabulous book, by the way. And I want to touch, there's another book called Say What You Mean, which as I said, I continually read on all of these things. And so often when we're communicating, we're really focused on our devices or hiding behind laptops. I can't tell you how many one-on-ones I've had with my own leaders where I never even make eye contact with them. And it really makes a difference to an employee when you are able to engage with them one-on-one or face-to-face in a meeting. Often we go into meetings to discuss a problem or a topic with our own agenda, and our minds are already made up and ready to defend our position. And this, coupled with the fact that we all come to work with our own challenges and baggage and assumptions based on our own experience, this impedes effective and productive conversations. So I would invite you that before your next one-on-one or staff meeting or planned conversation, take a moment to be in the present moment. Let go of the email you have to write, or the things that have been bothering you, the traffic on the way in, anything else that's distracting you, and kind of take a moment to center yourself before going in the meeting and actually engage in conversation, not defending your position. And most often there's more than one solution to a problem, and there is only one best solution in the moment. When we are curious and we then invite input from everyone, and that means everyone, even those that are not volunteering to speak. This actually drives inclusion. If they are invited to the meeting, they're relevant to the conversation. So you invite all participants to speak before the meeting is over. Be respectful, let people finish their thoughts, especially when we disagree, and ask why and invite feedback. And most importantly, and I think we forget this in a lot of conversations, remember to focus on what matters. Does it matter to be right, or that you find the solution that is best for the organization? Does the solution support the goals of the organization? And are you able to engage others in the meeting to explain how their idea supports what the goal is? I also want to point out that research from ADP Research Institute recommends having a meaningful conversation with each direct report weekly. A lot of us have these planned one-on-ones as we go up the leadership chain, but this is for, and I realize that some people have big teams, but it's something to prioritize. The research supports that 15 minutes is acceptable, and actually ask them questions like, what did they enjoy doing last week? What got them going? What did they hate doing last week? What were their real challenges? Priorities for the next week, and how can we help them? And this also helps with expectations and keeping those clear, but it also removes fear and worry of the team member. It's challenging in clinic settings because we have terminal degree, doctors and PhDs, et cetera. And then we have front desk and billing and topics or parts like that that are actually more of a trade because they went to a career college to have that done. And we need to find a way to engage everyone. We talk a lot about provider satisfaction, but what about front desk satisfaction, who are dealing with the patients one-on-one every day? So, yeah, and I can send that book as well. This one was actually really quite good. So now I'm going to show you some different initiatives that we did. There was no one initiative done separate from the other. They were done both when I worked at East Valley, which is in the Pomona, West Covina area, and my most recent job at Bay Area Community Health. So this was an initiative that I led at East Valley. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we sent out a blast from a generic leadership email with motivations on Monday, wisdom on Wednesday, and Friday was about self-care. There would be a graphic like you see here and a short narrative. Other members of the leadership team would suggest quotes to use, but I made sure that it happened every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, unless there was a holiday. It had a wide impact, especially to those who worked from home and were at our smaller clinics where leadership isn't necessarily sitting. We had a lot of responses from the more than 300 employees that received the notice. So much so that when I was leaving, they were like, who's going to do the notices now? We really have enjoyed those. So the key here is to be consistent and not skip days unless they're holidays, or to just drop it all together, because then that actually is louder when you actually stop doing something like this. And if you're looking for inspiration, you can check out my LinkedIn or Instagram pages where I post similar things to this every day. I have fellow colleagues, CFOs, and other leaders that actually use those. Let's see. Oops, sorry, I'm having trouble with advancing a little bit. Alan Mulally, who was the CEO of Ford and Boeing, said that leadership without gratitude or appreciation is an effort and futility. Time and again, polls are released that the most common reason people leave a job is not money. It's often because they don't feel appreciated and they do not feel valued. And for something so simple to do, this is very unfortunate. Gary Ridge, who was the CEO of WD-40, actually said that expressing appreciation that is authentic, specific, and timely can be a huge motivator and productivity booster, especially in tough times. Some things I want to point out about appreciation: that there is always enough time to express appreciation. Share it far and wide. Yes, authenticity is key, and it doesn't come naturally to everyone, so it may take some practice. It's not limited to supervisor and subordinate, and it does not require a formal program. I will point out that one size does not fit all. When I was at East Valley, we did a team hero of the month, and I had one team member who was a top performer, and he asked that I not nominate him for team hero anymore because he hated going up in front of the crowd to accept the award. So what seems like appreciation to you might not be to someone else. Peer-to-peer and leadership appreciation creates a strong, virtuous cycle, supporting the team members' personal feelings of value, both within the organization and among their peers and managers, creating even more positive feelings. And differently from monthly recognition that is submitted for a vote, this is multi-directional and is not bound by dates, times, or source. Peer-to-peer appreciation can really open up teams to feeling supported and connected to each other. It fosters an environment that supports the type of interaction that has an exponential positive impact on the organization. Providing written shout outs to each other periodically, which I'm going to give you some examples of in a couple slides, especially when they're shared publicly, is a very powerful tool for connection and motivation. It's also important to point out that you don't have to wait till your organization has a recognition program. So I would make it a way of behavior. That's what I did. We did have a team hero, but that was really it. So it happened once a month at a team meeting. And what happens is it becomes, I can't think of the word, but everybody realizes it, and then they're more open to it. And I was at a symposium actually in healthcare, and a man by the name of Tom Mayer, who's the CMO of the NFL, had said that you should increase your thank you quotient, and that you should aim to say 50 thank yous a day. There are people that impact what we do in all areas of our life, including at work, and it creates just a different energy for all of us. And it actually, the science supports, makes us feel better ourselves. So I think that connection, are there any, okay. I think that, and I'm sorry, I'm talking fast because I want to make sure I fit it into the 1 o'clock. So connection, I think, is one of the biggest drivers to retention. And it waned a lot during the pandemic, because even if people were working from home, they didn't really have the opportunity to connect and engage in a certain way when they were new employees. And even those that did start, because we were social distancing and masks and all these things, we weren't engaging in the same way. And I even failed at this as a leader with new hires that were, it's easier to ghost an organization that you don't feel connected to. So create opportunities for new team members to connect from the start, and cultivate an environment where team members can collaborate and problem solve independently. At the very end, I'm going to talk briefly about being a learning organization and how important it is to empower people to solve their problems and not have to come back to you or their lead every single time they have a question. I used to tell my team, so I was the CFO, and I told my team, this is where we are, point A, and we have to get to point Z. You come up with the methodology to get there, as long as it's auditable and supported. And having that self-realization to do those things can really create trust, connection. It empowers them. It's actually really quite a way to develop the employees. Encourage group recognition and peer-to-peer shout-outs, which I discussed, and incorporate other positive interventions into your meetings. So the Orlando Trauma Center, was where was the hospital, not who, but was the hospital where all of the victims of the Pulse shooting were taken, had just started an initiative where before every huddle, they said something they were grateful for. And they actually feel that because this started them in the right frame of mind when they started work, and was a shared experience that they all did, that it actually fortified them when they had to go through, which was at the time one of the worst mass shootings in the United States. And another suggestion I heard was that when you have regular meetings on a topic, obviously in between those meetings, people are, well, we hope that they're engaging in the topic that we're having. And a peer of mine had suggested that at the start of each meeting, we say what we learned since the last meeting. So, and give people some time to share at the start of those meetings. So you're not just going in right to the business. When we cultivate trust and connection through personal interactions in team meetings, it's really a small investment of time at the start of the meeting and can be a question or an activity. I have a long list of those, and you can also Google. I think the common term is icebreaker. And I was told by a previous CEO of mine that it was a complete waste of time and money, and we don't have the time to do these types of things, and we just need to get on with the meeting. And I would argue that making the time to connect with our team members as humans creates the connection and also reflects that we're interested in actually who they are. And it can improve retention. And then while I was at East Valley, we also, and this is a great suggestion because so many of us don't really understand the history of our organizations. And for a lot of community health centers, the history is very, very rich. So we did it maybe every 6 months, maybe once a year. We did what was called organizational trivia. So the team would give me a question, a week or so before the meeting. And then the CEO and I would make sure they were all answered in a robust manner, not just, we started in 1970 or something like that, but what was the actual history? Where did we come from? Or whatever the question was. And sometimes they were technical, but most often they were about our rich history. And I think, and the interesting part was one of my team members had worked there for a decade, and there were things that she didn't even know about the organization. So it shows you kind of how that can all manifest in a positive way. And people were very excited when they heard where we came from and how this started. So these are examples of the peer-to-peer appreciation. And I basically ordered cards. You can order them. Actually, you can get them on Amazon now, or you can get them on a company called Vaudeville. They're out there. You could Google shout outs and you would be able to find them. But the team, these are shots, photographs of actual cubicles, and the team would pin them up in their cubicles with other handouts I had given them. So one image there is the 4 agreements. Another one is the judge or learner map. There's all of these things, and they would share them. And the impact on those that came into our office to do business was important. And it was clear to them how we were working. And visitors would ask, like, what is that? Why do you have those up in your cubicle? And our team would just glow when they were reporting it to people. And you start to see other little pockets of these initiatives pop up. So not to mention, it gave the employees, the team members, a great sense of pride when they would hear what their team members thought. And some of those up there are even little thank you notes I would put on their desk. So a little bit of everything, but it really is impactful. So John Maxwell, who's someone else I read a lot of, talks about, you can communicate, but connecting is really the most important. So especially now where we really want to look at inclusion and belonging and how people can work together and respect who each other are as people. And often, and I think this is a retention problem, we aren't giving people time to be who they are. And so a connector makes it clear for all to understand. They can help translate and understand how the task someone's doing impacts the big picture and things like that. There's also finding common ground. We want to make sure that the employees, if there's a disagreement or there's 2 solutions to the same problem, we remember that there is a common place where we're all coming from. And try to create experiences for everyone, not just what you think the team wants to do. A connector also inspires others, and they lead by example regardless of title. Now, what's important to point out is that not everyone is a natural connector. And many leaders might argue that they just don't have the time. So if this is the case, have someone on a team take the lead to be the connector. There are people who thrive as connectors, and it's really amazing to see. So this is another intervention that we did at East Valley. And fact number one is that your brain is 31% more productive. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative, neutral, or stressed. The second fact is that the mind is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. It comes from one of my favorite resilience gurus, Rick Hansen. So research supports that our experiences literally can reshape our brains and can change our nervous system for better or for worse. Making an effort to pivot towards the positive is good for us and our well-being. The best part about this intervention is that our employees learn that we actually care about their well-being. And this in turn shifts the way they feel connected to the organization and trust leadership. So what this is and this actually comes from Duke University. I was at that same symposium I was at on healthcare, and Duke University did this intervention in their hospital, and then they did further research on it. But it's called the 3 Good Things Challenge. And for a 2-week period, for 14 nights, each night before going to sleep, write down 3 good things that happened that day. This is not necessarily a gratitude journal about something you're grateful for. It's reflecting on the day and seeing what positive things happened that day. And then indicate the positive feeling it gave you. Was it joy, hope, gratitude, awe, amusement, any of those? These good things can come from any part of your life. It doesn't have to be work related. And just thinking about them is not enough. There's science that supports that writing things down has a better impact. And don't worry about grammar or spelling because no one else is going to read it. This is for you to reflect on. And the things that you list can be relatively small and in importance. My partner made me coffee this morning, or something significant, like you earned a higher position or a greater opportunity. But the science supports that if you do this for 14 days, for 6 months to 12 to 18 months, they found participants still defaulting to to seeing the positive. They had actually retrained the way their brain was working. And the trees you see here, we did in spring of 2021 at East Valley, and we did it at all the clinics. Originally, this little Christmas tree, my team and I had done this in December of 2019. And really simple. It's a one-dimensional Christmas tree. I put lights on it. It doesn't have to be that, spectacular. We bought these little paper ornaments, put a bunch of pens out, and people would come in the next day and they would write down one of the things that they reflected on the night before. So what starts to happen in either of these slides is your trees become populated with all these good things. They don't put their name on them, but then other people start to see it. The board that you see to the right there on that slide is actually from Duke University. It's their example of the 3 good things. And so they originally just had stems, and then there would be petals on all of the flowers. So it is a significant, we had a really positive impact on people. And for those who had work from home, they would email, we had a champion at each location, and they would email their one good thing to the champion, and the champion would write it down and put it up on the tree so that nobody felt left out. And we did it at all 8 of East Valley's locations. And yeah, it was great. They hated it when we took them down. So this is a board-inspired intervention from Bay Area Community Health. When I worked at, we were talking about connection and retention of employees, and one of our board members is a motivational speaker, and she said that we should give these large coloring sheets to each clinic and have them during their break. There's a lot of science behind coloring being good for you, but whether it be at a break or at a on some wall that everyone could get to and color, whenever. These are 3 that came back to us from clinics, and these things were huge. They were like 6 by 8. They were enormous. And one clinic actually put them in the waiting room, and the children would get to color on it as well. And it was a competition, so there was a prize. So, the board voted, since it was board inspired, the board voted on it. and they got a prize, but it was actually, I mean, these prizes aren't significant, right? It's not like we can afford, it's not like they're winning a car. And if you look at the detail that is put into these, it's pretty spectacular. And I think when we give employees opportunities to do these things, they actually get very excited and want to be part of it, much like the video that I shared. So there's another team contest. Not everyone wants to wear a costume, myself included. I hate wearing a costume, but if you give me a pumpkin and tell me you want me to come up with a design that's going to be painted, because pumpkins go bad and you can't leave it on the counter. These were just 3. Bay Area Community Health had 28 locations. 8 of them were mobile, so 20 physical locations. And everybody wanted to be part of these. And some might say, sorry, there's a motorcycle outside my house right now, sorry. And some might say, oh, we don't have time for that. Oh, and what's this going to do for employees? But when you show the employees that you're even thinking about them, just with these small activities that are repeated throughout the year, I think it really has a positive impact on them. Let's see, we're at 12:45. We're right on schedule. So the last thing I wanted to cover is the importance and impact of learning at work. And it not only engages team members, but it shows that the organization finds their development is important and can drive retention. Some will say that they learn and take that knowledge somewhere else, and that may happen. But as I explained at the beginning of the presentation, there are many interventions, and they all must send the consistent message to the employee. So, and it's also in how learning at work is delivered. If it shouldn't only be performance driven, right? And not everyone wants to promote up. Some want to just expand their skills. So if we put them in a peer learning program, they never feel a sense, if we don't put them in, they never get to, in a peer learning program, they never get to feel that sense of belonging or inclusion, or that their work has value to the organization. They will go somewhere where it does. So we can do all the development we want, but if they still don't feel connected, it will be irrelevant. It's also incredibly empowering. So it fosters a transfer of knowledge. So there's no sole keepers of information, which intimidates many, but there never should be sole keepers of information. The learning becomes perpetual because it is a way that we do things. And when you create a more learning environment, you also, it reflects that we know mistakes are going to happen, but there's always opportunities to learn. And it can better access isolated teams and engage teams to work better, networking with their peers, breaks down silos across the organization. That is a significant impact. And the institutional memory lapse, it's challenging when those with all that knowledge leave. And this is an opportunity to, again, set the information free. The information is not what makes a person's role important. They're more than their clicks and their tasks that they do every day. We have human beings that work for us. And I think that we are in a period where, after much time of wanting people to just do what they were told to do, we have people that want to be recognized for who they are. And it can also unify a multi-generational workforce. Again, creating inclusion. And often, there are things that the older person knows and that the younger person can know on the same team. And so the exchange of that based on their experience can be, I know I say impactful a lot, but it can be very impactful. Peers become a credible source of help. Using your subject matter experts. You have people throughout your entire organizations that are probably never tapped for the information that they know and that becomes second nature to them. Employees become empowered to help themselves. Finding answers is empowering. And also, when you create a peer learning culture, your peers are more accessible. An employee might not want to go to their boss to ask a question, and they'd feel much more comfortable going to each other. It's a professional development for the trainers. Not everyone wants to be a manager, but giving opportunities to learn and develop peers can be very satisfying and expands their purpose. They're able to share acquired knowledge. Again, getting the information free. I used to have, when there used to be webinars that people would go to on our team, webinars, or even if they back when we went to meetings, actually in other buildings, they would come back and report out on what they learned. So it wasn't, you shouldn't have to send 8 people to the same thing. Have someone come back and explain what it is that they've seen. Peers learn better. Learning is closely aligned when it's closely aligned with the work goals. So if people understand why you want them to learn this or that, and where you want them to go with that, it can be very, very impactful. There's really not a downside to creating this, and it creates more connection. I know I keep using the word connection as well, between the people that work for an organization. So these are some tips on how to create a learning organization. The false assumption is that we all have to agree and make progress, or that disagreements always mean someone loses. However, when we're open to rethinking our position or ideas, even our beliefs, we're open to more opportunities. I think I mentioned earlier that there's always something to learn, but if our idea of learning is limited, we miss the opportunities to learn new things and ideas. Adam Grant, who I mentioned before, a great one to follow if you follow people, he's brilliant, says that the purpose of learning isn't to affirm our beliefs, but it's to evolve our beliefs. So all of these pretty much I've covered already. I do want to point out the assume positive intent that is the last one on this slide. It's one of my favorite additions to my personal toolbox during the pandemic. And it comes from Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO of Pepsi back in the 90s, back when women were not the CEO of big companies. And she used assume positive intent to take a beat and remove the bias she assumed was in statements that she heard. And she felt that it kept her mind positive and open. So those are the interventions that I have, but I do want to tell you all a story. And this is something you can also go back and take to your teams. I've shared this with several teams that have worked for me, and at conferences when I speak, and it really is powerful, and it really brings home what it is that we're doing and what we're all trying to do here. So early one morning, as the sun was rising in the sky, an old man went for a walk along a beach. And in a storm the night before, thousands of starfish had been washed ashore, which happens when there's a tidal surge, and they were everywhere. And as he walked, he noticed a child off in the distance, and he was picking something up from the sand, and he was throwing it into the sea. And over, they were bending over, picking something up and throwing it into the sea. And so the old man walks down the beach to the young boy and said, asked them what they were doing. And they said, I'm throwing the starfish into the sea. And the old man said, why would you do that? And the boy explained, because the tide is going out and the sun is coming up, and soon it will be too hot, and the sand and the starfish will dry up. And the man threw his head back. He was laughing. He says, but the beach goes on for miles and miles. There are thousands of starfish stranded out there. You will never be able to make a difference. The child gently picked up another starfish and threw it into the sea, and it splashed into the cool water. The child turned to the man and said, I made a difference to that one. So I invite you to remember that it starts with one, right? And you can bring out initiatives, and this applies whether it's community health or whether it's employee retention, that you need to start somewhere. And if you don't feel that it's like something that can be rolled out organizationally, and I will tell you, when you do these things, you are going to have people push back against you. They're, oh, that'll never work, or they'll make assumptions based on something so simple, just an idea that you had of something you want to roll out. And I urge you that if you have an idea, try it, because you just have to try, and you'll try, and something will be more successful than something else. And the more you do it, the more successful you will learn. It will become more successful, and other people will see it. and other people will want to do it. Just like with the 3 Good Things Challenge. I did 1 Christmas tree in a finance office, and a year later, we're doing 8 of them throughout the organization. And it's funny because when I was presenting the 3 Good Things Challenge, our director of behavioral health was like, "Oh, I love this idea." So, and when you do these sort of interventions, which any of them on their own seem small, they add up, and your employees see that you're thinking about them. So I think it's important. So I got my master's late in my career, which is why I'm doing all this research on this. And when I went back in 2016, I didn't want to learn about finance, wanted to learn about people, which is why this is what I talk about. And I went to the Drucker School of Management at Claremont Graduate University. And Peter Drucker is known as the father of modern management, and says that when he would work with other companies, he was never impressed when people would rave about his work and thank him. He would tell them to save their praise and instead ask them what would they do differently on Monday. So it's Thursday now. I guess you have a couple days to think. Monday's a holiday, but I think you get the drift. I'm also here if you want to ping me. I'm happy to provide feedback, or if you're like, I heard that thing, can you remind me what it was, or ask Andres, and Andres can ask me, however you want to do that. But I'm pretty accessible. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And thank you, CCALAC, for asking me to join again. I really am honored that you wanted to include me.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. This is a really great presentation. So I want to give a few minutes. I want to open up for any questions. Again, feel free to type those questions in the chat. You can use the raise hand button as well, or unmute yourselves, and you can ask Cheryl any questions that may have come up for you during her presentation.
Hi, this is Bridget Ben Moshe, and I just want to, I've already thanked you in the chat, Cheryl, but I just want to really say that for me, because oftentimes we're challenged when we think about retention. What does that really mean? What does it look like? What are some very specific strategies that we can lay out? And a lot of times we turn to recruitment. We need more people,
Right.
Okay, to help our existing staff so they don't feel overburdened. But I think some of these strategies that you went over are very impressive, and I have to admit that they are, while on the one hand they might seem a little common sense, but on the other hand they're really not. I mean, something like connectivity, which is really, again, you would think it's a given, but it just doesn't happen the way that it should, and it's not really, in my opinion, thought of very much when you talk about retention. So I think these are very good to know, and I'm thankful that you were able to present and share this kind of information today.
Thank you. You said the common sense piece. One of my favorite sayings by Stephen Covey is common sense does not mean common action. So we might think, oh yeah, who wants to do those things? Oh, saying thank you, it sounds so simple. I'm still training my husband after several years of being together to say thank you and please. But the other piece is, remember that retention is actually an end, right? We are successful at retention if people stay, but you have to do things to get, that's an end result, that we have improved retention. Retention really isn't an action that you can take. My action can be that I'm going to connect with you. Right. I am going to see you. I'm going to do things with you. So those are the verbs. So think of the verbs that impact you, and chances are those will impact others as well. So thank you for your comments, Bridget. What clinic are you from? Where are you from?
The Children's Clinic, TCC in Long Beach.
Yep. Anyone else?
Hi, I do have a question. This is Marisol with VHS. Going back to the learning culture, I'm all for giving opportunities to the staff, having them learn new skills. But when you have hesitation or from the staff, do you have any advice? Their hesitation or resistance, I should say, it's because they think it's more work for them, or they're just not interested, or they're they're in fear of learning a new skill. So how
So-
would you manage that?
Okay, so I completely appreciate that question. And that also goes to what I was explaining about people with terminal degrees that are probably lifelong learners, and people that are very, our frontline staff, our MAs and our front desk can actually be very most similar to our patients, right? And as I mentioned, we all bring our baggage and our insecurities to work. I mean, I do. I'm sure you do. I mean, we all do. And it can be even bigger. So if no one has ever really championed the staff members in that way, there's a way to present learning in a way that is non-threatening. And I would also get curious, ask them, so why does this threaten you, or why do you think you can't do it? One of the intervention I had done was the strength finders, which is really a poll you take and you find out what your top 5 strengths are. And I had an employee that said, I don't want to take the test, I'll fail it. And I said, you can't fail it. Everybody will have, out of the 34, 5 top strengths. And it was very challenging. And then she did it and saw that she actually had, based on the assessment, strengths. And it was a big pivot for her and a couple of the other staff members to be like, oh, I didn't know that was something that was a strength. I didn't know empathy was a strength, or I didn't know connecting, because these are all parts of the strengths and it was actually very telling. But I think we need to ask, you'll get, it's just like resistance to change. People are very comfortable in the grooves that they have worn for themselves. And it's about, and sometimes the learning doesn't even have to be new skills as much as it can be cross training. It can be seeing something from someone else's position. I did that a lot with billing and front desk. So, there's a lot of different opportunities for it, but I would dig deeper. I would get curious with it, but, and see, and also full disclosure, you're not going to hit everyone. I mean, everyone's not going to be like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, especially if no one's ever supported them on learning, right? Learning. Yeah, I could give you a whole other one on learning and mindset. Make a note for that, Andres.
Right. Is there a certain assessment that you recommend for us to?
I loved the Strength Finders assessment. It's now through Gallup, GALLUP, who they have since, but you can still Google it. It's actually I used it as a way to coach the team together. Everybody took it. You buy the book. The book's like $20, and the assessment comes with the book. And the book actually explains what they mean. And then I got some of the coaching things and would read the cards. And it was actually great, and funny story. So everybody had harmony in theirs. I did a table, right? My whole team had harmony except for me. And I had one guy that worked for me who had been in the military. And he said, and all my team was like, oh, Cheryl doesn't have harmony. And he said, if she did, we'd never go anywhere, because harmony is about making sure everybody's happy all the time. And you can't always go somewhere if everybody's happy all the time. So, but it's a fun assessment, because people will resist it. And then you'll be like, but look at what you're good at. A lot of our people, we only go to them when they mess up, Marisol. We only go to them and say, you did this wrong. We don't go to people and say, you're valuable to this organization, and I would really love to help you be more fulfilled in your role.
I want to agree with you on that, and hopefully with this crew training, we'll be able to improve that aspect of our leadership. Yes,
it's our nature to look at what's wrong, not what's right.
That is correct. Thank you so much.
Sure. Oh, I ran over time. Sorry, Andres.
No, you're good. We're good on time. We have a few minutes. So I would rather take up time with folks that have questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? So often nobody asks me any questions. And then at the end I'm like, oh.
Yeah. All right. Any final questions for Cheryl before we hop into our breakout sessions?
I'm so sorry. I just thought about another one.
Sure.
Me again. The communication, the two-way communication. I consider myself to communicate a lot, not always in a very good way. I have to admit that. But there's some employees or some meetings that I don't get any that communication that I was expecting. Although I have asked multiple times, is there any questions? Am I being cleared? There's no participation, there's no communication from them. And I know that you said to maybe talk to them after, but wouldn't that contradict the inclusion if we're trying to include that person, whether it's for that meeting or the team in the health center, if we put them aside and ask those questions, isn't that
So maybe maybe I wasn't clear, Marisol. I didn't
Okay.
say talk to them after. I think in the meeting, you want to engage people to talk, and you literally, so I was just doing this Jetty training with CPCA, and one of the rules is you don't get out of the meeting until you talk, right? You have to give some feedback. And silence is not consent, right?
okay?
So, but that also comes from creating a safe space, right? That comes from, okay, I invite you to talk to me, to talk to the team with your opinions.
Mhm.
And you might not like what they say. And maybe that's what the sensing is. I'm not making any assumptions, Marisol, but I'm just saying, if people think they're going to get in trouble for speaking up, which means it's not a psychologically safe space, then they're not going to, right? But there's communication where we're telling people what we expect from them, right? But we would always want them to respond with, do you see that there's any barriers with that, right? Are there any problems that you foresee from this? And sometimes, we're not all going to agree. This idea that everybody has to agree is wrong, right? We don't have to agree as long as we're all heading in the direction that's best for the organization. Yeah.
And I think that by not all of us agreeing is just give us more tools to grow and to think about other ways, not just my way and that's it. I always consider their opinion. There's no initiative or no new task that is implemented without me asking for their opinion, and to see if they're actually going to be able to take over that task on top of everything of their daily activities. But you might be right. I have a very strong personality, and I might have to make some changes.
Yeah, and it takes a while. People think, because I have a loud voice and that I talk very directly, that I'm yelling, and I'm not. This is just the way I talk. And the irony is that when I'm really angry, I go in my office and close the door and I won't talk to you. Like, I don't come out and yell about things. People think that, but this is just the way I talk. And I've always talked that way. And people that have worked with me for a long time know, oh, she's not mad. That's just, I'm direct. I got stuff to do. Right.
Right.
But we do have to make sure that we are doing it. And I can give you just really quick, Andres, I'm sorry, I'm running. But there is this great intervention that I did for myself, Marisol, which is I invited 3 of my team members to meet with me once a quarter and tell me what they wanted more of, what they wanted less of, and what they wanted to stay the same. And you can do this with just people that work for you. You can do it with peers. You can do it with your boss. But when you do it for the people that work for you, the things that you think are bothering them are not. The things that you think have really upset them are usually not what's on the list. It's usually something else. But and you also have to be you have to understand the moment, right? You can't just, wait a minute, what? Why did you feel that way? And you can't challenge them. You have to say, okay, point taken. I had a couple things that have come up, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I probably could have handled that better. Okay, thank you.
Okay, what were those 3 things?
What you want more of, what you want less of, and what you want to stay the same. And it's a meeting with the 4 of you, right? The 3. I did it with 3 employees, And it's a
Okay.
meeting, it's a face-to-face, it's not send me an email, it's nothing like that. And
Okay.
you've got to let them know there's no repercussions, but this can actually help you then give people that work with you more of what they want.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Right, those were really great questions. All right, so we're gonna hop on to the presentation, Cheryl's presentation will be made available through Chatter. So make sure that you check on there. Her contact information is on that last slide, so you can connect with Cheryl about any of the information she shared today. And I just want to say thank you, Cheryl, for another great presentation, for all of your knowledge and all of the resources that you provided today. Really
so much.
Appreciate it.
And I will send you the name of that book and the other communication book. They're both really good. All right.
Perfect. All right. Thank
you
you so much.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Take care. All right. So I'm going to pop in the 3 questions that we're going to discuss in the breakout rooms. I've just popped them in the chat. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. We're going to take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 1:20 to debrief. So give me 1 second. Let me open up the breakout rooms, and they're all open now. All right, looks like folks are coming back. We have about 12 seconds before all the rooms close out. All right, great. It looks like everybody should be back now. So let's chat a little bit about some of your discussions. Can I get maybe a couple groups just to share out what your discussions entailed, and some feedback on these questions? Any volunteers?
Yeah, I can volunteer.
Great, thank you, Jorge.
Yeah, I go by George.
Oh,
I know.
George, sorry.
I should actually change that to just George in quotations. The only time I hear Jorge is when my mom or my wife are mad at me, so it stresses me out.
I'll make sure to say George. Thank you for clarifying.
So I'll make it really simple. I looked at the 3 questions, and the what we need to make things better is stability in this market. The price of every employee is so unstable that employees are pretty much free agents at this point. And the analogy I made was, so as a Laker fan my entire life, but when free agency became the norm and my teams lost every player I loved over a 2-year or 3-year period, and every couple of years I had to remember new names, and I had no attachment to these new players coming in every 2 or 3 years, I stopped being, I didn't stop being a Laker fan, I stopped being a sports fan.
Gotcha.
And the same thing with the Raiders, even though they move around a lot, I still was attached to players, and then they're all in different places over 2 or 3 years. So our market has created all this free agency situation where it's hard to keep track of our staff. And when you don't have stability, you start losing your internal culture, because everyone is coming in and you don't have enough time, because they're moving around so quickly, to engender that culture. So you actually lose your own internal culture and compass. And all we are in now is survival mode. How much money can we throw out there? And let's hope that lasts long enough that they might want to stay after 6 months. So that's my contribution.
Yeah, thank you for that, George. I think it's a really important point that you make, right? Yes, what is the market doing to, right, folks? Where are they going? How often are they shifting into different positions, whether in or outside of the organization? And that was a great analogy that you made, right? It's once you start getting attached to someone or get used to a specific employee, right? They're on their way out and they've been there for a very short amount of time. So really great point there. Any other feedback, perspectives on these questions? And just to add to that, next, so I believe we're going to be doing an onboarding piece too, right? And talking about like the culture, right? The culture begins from the moment that folks are recruited and then onboarded into the organization. So how do we build all of that too, right? All of these pieces essentially are part of a larger piece of different interventions that can really support some of these efforts with retention, recruitment, wellness, all of that. So any other perspectives, any other
Yeah,
feedback?
I have a perspective. So once we were done, addressing how hard everything is, it's like we come to the conclusion that, it really requires creativity because there's no easy answer. There's so many moving parts. And one thing we talked about was that on the admin side, there's more opportunities to kind of, and it's still hard, but there's more opportunities to kind of, set some time aside to address things. But on the patient care side, everyone is busy from the time opening till close, speaking with patients, talking with patients, and how can they make time for things like one-on-ones and team building exercises and, relationship building opportunities with their staff and with their coworkers. So, and then not only that, we have remote workers, people working from out of state. It just gets more and more complicated. And I think, as unfortunately, like we don't have a lot of opportunities to really build our creativity and strategy building, and that's the foundation of everything. You're not gonna, like I said earlier, you're not gonna have an easy one-way approach that will affect everyone in a positive way. So, and then obviously we all agree that the most difficult resource to come about is time. So time is the most valuable resource, and it's really hard to find the time and to even feel good about giving someone another thing to have to do, even if it's something so great as retention strategies. So I think that's what it is. And just giving everyone first the understanding of why retention is important and what can be done about it. And then, setting the time aside and coming up with a creative plan to make sure that that's possible, because just giving someone the ask without even understanding the challenges is really, really just going to make people upset.
Definitely. Right. That creativity and Cheryl showed some really great examples of some creative ways to engage folks, right? As part of a team, as part of the organization. So really, how do we get creative in these spaces when folks, really a great point, when folks are working virtually, when folks are out of state, how do we keep the team cohesive, right? And we will have a piece on that as well. I'll go back to George. I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I don't want to be, don't take me as like the person that's screaming Chicken Little, the sky's falling, because I really am not. And Jacqueline should be able to, she'd agree with me. Jacqueline and I work together, and we have really great perspective conversations. But I think one of the disenchanting parts of and again, it comes into people looking for more money because they can right now, is that the desire to be a mentor now comes with a price tag. Well, that's not part of my job description. What am I going to get paid in order to do something outside of my job description? Where before people were much more open to mentorship and having people shadow them and just being that like mentor. So when you get to that point, you almost have to not look for the time. You almost have to build that by maybe hiring someone who is specifically a mentor that travels from clinic to clinic, department to department, mentoring new people coming in different clinics. So you have MAs that work in peds and adults and wherever it might be, and you might have someone who's a professional mentor that travels and keeps those new employees and provides that mentorship, so you don't have to rely on goodwill from people who are now looking for more money.
Definitely.
It seems mechanical, but it might be the way to go moving forward.
Yeah. That sounds like a really great idea. And also, I'm also curious about, so when we have the consultant that's going to be talking about onboarding piece, what does that really look like? And I remember from her presentation last year, when she talked about follow-up, like what does it look like for follow-up after folks get onboarded, right? Because oftentimes it's like, okay, they have their job description, they know their role now, they're doing their job, there's no need to check in, but then there is need to check in, right? And that mentorship can be doesn't have to be so formal either, right? Like I've worked in different orgs where I've looked up to my supervisors, right, as mentors, or their supervisors as mentors indirectly, right? Just learning from, how they do things and the processes in different aspects of the org. So there are ways to do that. For example, Louise for us does she does CEO sessions I think it's every couple months now, where she picks a specific topic that folks are interested in, and she just talks for an hour on that specific topic, allows us to ask any questions, and kind of gives us an opportunity to figure out how it all works, right? So these are really important ways to engage as well. Any last comments? I know we're at time. Any last comments or any feedback that folks would like to provide before we close out today?
Hi, this is Bridget, and I'll just add, I agree with so much that was said today from the beginning and even in our breakouts and even after. And it almost feels like, there needs to be time to make time. There needs to, you have to schedule time to make time for these important strategies to actually go underway. Otherwise, a lot of times there'll be some initial talks about it, and then guess what? No one talks about it anymore, so they just remain in the parking lot. And we know they're important, but it's just, having the bandwidth to go back and then fully implement them. And it's just really, again, it's where is that time going to come from, other than just planning to have time. It's the best way I could put it.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to ask Alex if he could launch the poll. For some reason, it's not working on my end. If y'all could just take a few minutes to fill that out before we close out today, that would be really helpful. We really appreciate all of your feedback with that. Other than that, thank you all for great interactive training. Again, Cheryl's presentation will be made available through Chatter. It looks like the poll was launched. Please fill that out, those 6 questions. And other than that, have a good rest of your day and weekend, and we will see each other next week. Take care, everyone. Bridget, I'm hanging back here so that I could help you with the chatter.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.